This is the moment the strongman myth starts collapsing. Donald Trump is not projecting power right now. He is bleeding leverage. And the panic is visible. World leaders are blocking him in real time. Not quietly, not subtly, openly. As Trump floats the idea of striking Iran, selling it as some clean, limited operation, governments across Europe, the Pacific, and North America are refusing to line up behind him. No coalition, no staging support, no unified front, just silence and distance. That is a geopolitical humiliation. And it gets worse. Reports indicate his own chairman of the Joint Chiefs is warning him that without Allied backing, this would not be a controlled strike. It would be dangerous, resource draining, and potentially catastrophic. Critical munitions shortages, escalation risks, American forces exposed in a volatile region, a conflict that could spiral fast. In other words, this isn't strength. It's magical thinking. Trump thrives on projection, on the illusion that everyone eventually bends. But right now, allies are not bending. They are building around him. Canada's Prime Minister is actively forging trans-Pacific and transatlantic partnerships designed to reduce reliance on the United States. Read that carefully. The world is reorganizing to insulate itself from Trump. Meanwhile, Trump is lashing out, slapping 15% tariffs on partners, fabricating stories about hospital ships being sent to Greenland, claims the Pentagon quietly contradicts, attacking his own generals on social media when they caution restraint. This is what desperation looks like. When a leader starts threatening war without allies, inventing logistical fantasies, and raging at the professionals trying to prevent disaster, that's not dominance consolidating. That's control slipping. And when global powers begin coordinating without you, when your own military is waving red flags, and when your economic retaliation pushes partners further away, that's not strategy. That's the beginning of isolation. And isolation is how power dies. Now let's talk about the lies, because this entire situation is built on gaslighting. For months, Trump has been insisting that he has total control, total leverage, total dominance over foreign policy decisions. He has repeatedly claimed that military leaders are fully aligned with him, that allies are begging for his leadership, that any action he considers would be swift, decisive, and overwhelmingly supported. Let's look at what he really said. He took to Truth Social and declared that reports of General Dan Kane cautioning against war with Iran were 100% incorrect. He claimed his top general believes any military action would be easily won. He insisted that everything written about potential escalation was fake. But here's the problem. Independent reporting indicates the opposite. Military planners are warning about munitions shortfalls. They are warning that a limited strike would almost certainly not remain limited. They are warning that without Allied staging and logistical cooperation, U.S. personnel would be placed at significant risk. That's not fake news. That's operational reality. Trump also claimed that Iran's nuclear facilities were already obliterated, blown to smithereens, completely destroyed by prior U.S. operations. Pause. If that were true, if everything had already been obliterated, then what exactly is the justification for renewed military threats? What is there left to destroy? You can't have it both ways. Either the facilities were neutralized, or they weren't. Either Iran's capability was eliminated, or it remains a threat. But Trump is simultaneously claiming total destruction and urgent necessity for further strikes. That contradiction isn't subtle, it's incriminating. And then there's Greenland. Trump publicly posted that hospital ships were being deployed to assist Greenland, painting himself as some benevolent global responder. Let's look at the reality. Pentagon officials confirmed there were no such deployment orders. The Navy's 2 hospital ships are in maintenance, one undergoing repairs, the other in a long-term overhaul. No orders, no movement, no mission. Just a social media fantasy. And when asked for clarification, the Pentagon deferred to the White House. The White House pointed back to Trump's social media posts. This is governance by improvisation. This is foreign policy by impulse. Now, let's zoom out to the economic front. Trump is imposing 15% tariffs on allies while simultaneously demanding their cooperation on military operations. That's not strategy. That's self-sabotage. You don't alienate trade partners and then expect them to risk regional stability on your behalf. Meanwhile, Canada's Prime Minister is openly stating that in an uncertain world, Canada is diversifying trade and reducing dependence on the United States. He is traveling to India, Australia, Japan, strengthening ties across the Pacific and Europe. That's not symbolic, that's structural realignment. And here's the kicker. Even conservative provincial leadership in Canada is warning that tariffs are harming both economies and fueling inflation in the United States. So while Trump claims he is strengthening America's position, allies are publicly describing economic damage and political backlash inside the U.S. He says he's winning. Allies say he's destabilizing. He says generals are aligned. Reports say they are warning. He says nuclear facilities were obliterated. Yet he argues urgent military escalation is necessary. These aren't minor inconsistencies. This is a pattern, projection, exaggeration, contradiction, retraction. And every time reality pushes back, he doubles down. That's not strength. That's someone losing control of the narrative and trying to shout louder than the facts. Now let's go deeper, because this is where it gets truly grotesque. I want you to picture this. Internal briefings, intelligence summaries, logistics assessments, the kind of documents that don't make it onto social media, the kind of documents that professionals rely on. Let's start with the military warnings. Multiple reports indicate that in recent briefings, General Dan Kane raised concerns about shortfalls in critical munitions if a sustained operation against Iran were launched. Shortfalls. That's not a small word. That's not bureaucratic caution. That means supply gaps. Now pause right there. We're not talking about a hypothetical skirmish. We're talking about one of the most complex military environments in the world. The Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, regional proxy networks, ballistic missile capabilities. And you're hearing the phrase, shortfalls in critical munitions. That should make anyone with a pulse uneasy. Now imagine the follow-up briefing, because according to reporting, planners are explaining that any strike on Iranian assets would almost certainly not be singular or decisive. Let me repeat that. Not singular. Not decisive. In other words, this would not be a one-night operation. It would invite retaliation. It would require follow-up strikes. It would expose U.S. bases and naval assets across the region. You can't make this up. And while those warnings are being delivered, Trump is publicly posting that everything would be easily won. Easily. This is magical thinking at a geopolitical scale. Now let's move to the nuclear claim. Trump stated that Iranian nuclear facilities were blown to smithereens by B-2 bombers during what he described as a prior operation. He declared the threat essentially eliminated. So I want you to think about that timeline. If facilities were destroyed, obliterated, then intelligence assessments would reflect degraded capability. If capability was degraded, then diplomatic channels would focus on verification and containment. Instead, what we're seeing are renewed threats of strikes. So either the facilities were not actually obliterated, or the public statement was exaggerated beyond recognition. Both scenarios are disastrous. Now let's examine Greenland. Trump posted that hospital ships were being sent to assist Greenland after a U.S. nuclear submarine surfaced due to a medical emergency. Dramatic narrative, heroic framing. But here's what we know. The USNS Comfort, based in Norfolk, is undergoing repairs scheduled through April. The USNS Mercy, based in San Diego, is in a maintenance period that began last July and extends for a year. That's not speculation. Those are fleet maintenance schedules. So, when no deployment orders exist, and both vessels are in maintenance yards, and the Pentagon confirms no movement, that's not miscommunication. That's fabrication. And then comes the international diplomatic layer. France summoned the U.S. ambassador, Charles Kushner. Yes, that Charles Kushner, convicted of tax evasion and witness tampering before receiving a presidential pardon, after he made comments interfering in French domestic politics. Let's pause there. An ambassador interfering in domestic political narratives of the host nation is already diplomatically reckless. But when summoned to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, he reportedly refused to show. Refused. You do not ignore a formal diplomatic summons without consequences. France responded by effectively freezing him out, barring meetings with officials. That's not symbolic embarrassment. That's operational isolation. Now zoom out even further. Canada's Prime Minister is on a multinational trip, India, Australia, Japan, reinforcing trade, energy, defense cooperation. Public statements emphasize reducing economic dependency on the United States in an uncertain world. Uncertain world. Diplomatic language is often polite. That phrase is not polite. It is a coded signal that the United States under Trump is viewed as unstable. Meanwhile, provincial leaders in Canada are warning that tariffs imposed by Trump are driving inflation in the United States itself, hurting American workers. So let's tally this up. Military leaders raising red flags, allies declining coalition support, major trading partners diversifying away from U.S. reliance, fabricated naval deployments contradicted by the Pentagon, an ambassador frozen out by a European government, and at the center of it all, a president insisting everything is under control. Gross. This is not a single bad headline. This is systemic strain. When generals caution, when diplomats are sidelined, when allies hedge, when economic retaliation backfires, when narratives contradict documented logistics, that's not normal turbulence. That's a pattern of erosion. And erosion, when ignored long enough, turns into collapse. Now let's widen the lens, because this isn't just about Iran. It isn't just about tariffs. It isn't just about Greenland or France. This is about pattern recognition. When you step back, what you're seeing is not a series of isolated incidents. You're watching cumulative instability. Start with behavior. Trump is increasingly ranting and raving on social media, attacking generals, contradicting intelligence assessments, fabricating logistics stories, threatening allies, and then pivoting hours later to say he would rather make a deal. The oscillation is constant. Threaten war, demand loyalty, deny reports, claim obliteration, float negotiations, impose tariffs, blame the media. It's chaotic. And chaos at that level isn't strength, it's volatility. Now layer in the economic component. He is imposing 15% tariffs broadly, not strategically targeted sanctions, but sweeping measures that hit allies and trading partners. Provincial leaders in Canada are openly warning that these tariffs are increasing prices inside the United States. Inflation pressure doesn't magically disappear because you post in all caps. Tariffs are paid by importers. Costs get passed on. Consumers feel it. So while he claims economic nationalism, families feel higher grocery prices and higher goods costs. That disconnect matters. Now let's talk about political positioning. Midterm elections loom large in any second-term presidency. Border states, industrial states, Senate seats, those matter. And when trade disputes start costing jobs in manufacturing corridors, that reverberates politically. If economic uncertainty spreads while foreign policy appears erratic, that's not just a policy issue. That's an electoral vulnerability. Meanwhile, international partners are diversifying away from U.S. dependency. Canada strengthening Pacific ties, Europe recalibrating defense posture discussions, diplomatic relationships cooling. That's not how global superpower dominance traditionally looks. It looks like hedging. Now, zoom out further to business credibility. Trump's brand has a long record of bankruptcies, failed ventures, shuttered enterprises, casinos, stakes, university programs, rebranding cycles that collapse under scrutiny, a pattern of overpromise and underdeliver. The same model appears here. Promise decisive victory, promise total obliteration, promise easy wins. Reality intrudes. Logistics push back. Allies hesitate. Costs rise. And then the narrative shifts. This is the same playbook, just applied at geopolitical scale. And here's the deeper issue. Strong institutions require stability. Markets require predictability. Alliances require trust. Military planning requires consistency. When rhetoric swings wildly from obliterated to urgent threat, from total support to fake news, from hospital ships deployed to no orders issued, that erodes credibility. Credibility is currency in foreign policy. Once it's devalued, rebuilding it takes years. Now consider the diplomatic embarrassment in France. An ambassador frozen out after interfering in domestic politics and refusing a summons. That's not just personal awkwardness. That signals to other nations that diplomatic norms are being disregarded. And when norms erode, alliances weaken. Layer all of this together. Economic friction, military caution, diplomatic isolation, political volatility, erratic communication. This isn't a single misstep. It resembles late-stage overextension. Historically, administrations that begin lashing out at allies while ignoring internal warnings are not consolidating power. They are reacting to perceived loss of control. And control appears to be the core issue here. Because when leaders feel secure, they don't fabricate logistics. They don't attack their own generals publicly. They don't impose broad tariffs in the middle of coalition building efforts. They don't oscillate between war is easy and I prefer a deal within the same news cycle. That's not strategic calibration. That's instability bleeding outward. And the world is responding accordingly, by insulating itself. If this were a one-off incident, it could be dismissed as turbulence. But when the pattern repeats across military, economic, diplomatic, and political domains, that's not turbulence, that's structural stress. And structural stress left unchecked doesn't plateau, it fractures. Here's the bottom line. This is the difference between reality and performance, between institutions and ego, between truth and fabrication. When military leaders are raising red flags, when allies are stepping back, when economic partners are reorganizing without you, the responsible move is caution, coordination, and honesty. Not escalation, not denial, not magical thinking. We are watching what happens when projection replaces policy, when social media posts attempt to override logistics, when bravado tries to drown out briefings. And that is dangerous, because democracies cannot function on invented narratives. They cannot sustain alliances on contradiction. They cannot protect lives on impulse. Isolation is not strength. Anger is not strategy. Fabrication is not leadership. The world is reacting. Allies are recalibrating. Institutions are pushing back. And voters are paying attention. This moment matters. Accountability matters. Facts matter. If you care about responsible leadership, about stability, about protecting democratic institutions from reckless decision-making, stay informed and stay engaged. Hit subscribe. Help us keep building independent media that calls out chaos with clarity. Share this analysis. Support platforms that value evidence over ego, because sunlight is powerful, and panic fades when exposed.